I'm going to go over some frequently asked questions that I get, or a lot of people get, most tackle shops will get from people that are using braided lines, some of the common problems. One of the things is they'll say they don't want the fish to see the color. Like I explained earlier, that the color doesn't matter because any Dyneema or Spectra, any braided line is visible no matter what color underwater to fish, so it is an intrusion. So I suggest again use a fluorocarbon leader. So the color doesn't matter. The other thing is I get is wind knots, or air knots as some people call it, or a big tangle in their line. There's so many specific details that involve wind knots, it's hard to say when I'm not there to observe the wind knot. But a lot of things that will help you is you'll hear people say close the bail by hand and then tug the line. Because when the braided line, which has very little memory, gets a little loose from on the spool, it'll cause a wind knot. That'll help a little bit. Angler experience has a lot. The type of rod that you use, the type of reel that you use. Some reels that are newer are made for braided line. They make the way the reel rotates and how the rotors and the worm gears work are made for braided line. But you know, the number one thing that I found from chartering on air knots is not all of those. It's actually when I tie my leader to my braided line without using a swivel, and that's how I suggest everybody should use it, that if the knot is left a little too big and you bring the knot from the fluorocarbon leader or your monofilament leader to the braided line into the eye guides of your rod, and you load the rod and you cast, the braided line, the line comes off the reel, the braided line will come off really fast, the knot will tick one of the guides, and then what happens is it slows down the leader, and the braided line will catch up and form a big wad. And that's how most of your wind knots or your air knots will form. Now, if you're casting braided line into the wind, and the wind's above you, if you cast above, that's going to cause some wind knots. So if you learn how to side cast when the wind's blowing at you, or get the wind to your back. So if you cut the wind with casts, that'll also help. So remember, tying your knots, especially if you bring it inside the guides of your rod, make sure they're tight and small and they're clipped all the way down. Now you can clip your knot all the way down to bare, till it's nothing. If you have a good knot, it's not going to come out. And then also close your bail by hand. And if you're casting in the wind, you want to cast to the side. Those should all help you not get air knots. Now, if you have a light or a small bait, compared to a heavy bait, that's also, the heavier bait makes the line come off the reel much smoother. A lighter bait, again, is much harder. If it catches the wind in the air, the side of the bait, it also slows down that speed, and again, the braided line will back up and get tangled. So a few of those things will help you. The smaller the diameter, the more you have to manage your line, because it tangles much more and it's much harder to get out. One other thing I'll say about braided line is you never want to grab it when it's tight. So if you have a big fish and he's running, if you grab the braided line, it acts as a razor. It will cut through your finger. So make sure you don't touch it. If you want to add extra drag and you want to slow the fish down, don't grab the line. Just take your finger and palm the spool with your palm or your fingers. Don't, whatever you do is, if you grab the braided line, like I said, it will cut you. Speaking of that, if you hook a big fish and he runs into a dock and you have a lot of tension on the braided line, if the braided line with tension on it touches a oyster, a barnacle, or the side of a piling, it's a good chance it's going to get cut. So your best option there is to open the bail and let the fish go. Free line that line out, because that braided line won't have any tension. If you notice, when you have a tight braided line, you take a knife and you cut it, it cuts real easy. When it's real loose without any tension, you can't cut it at all. Like trying to cut it with a nail clipper is very hard, but cutting it with a knife with tension, it'll cut right through it. So remember those things, and that should help your fishing with braided line. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, you can send it to info@oherofishing.com. We will answer your questions in next week's webinar.